What's up, YouTube? So today I want to discuss the Hexinverter Mindphaser. It's their new complex oscillator. So first, some sound examples, then I want to talk a little bit about what exactly a complex oscillator is and some of the inspirations behind the module, and then we're going to get into some of the capabilities. Let's dive in and have a look. So what is a complex oscillator? I guess the way it differs from a regular oscillator is it creates a variety of different tones, something a lot more complex than your basic shapes, waveforms that we know, saws, squares, sines, that kind of thing. The idea behind them is most of them are kind of loosely based on the legendary Buchla Complex Waveform Generator Model 259. I think I got that right, quite a mouthful. For those who have seen my video on the Arturia Buchla Easel V, you probably kind of know already what I'm talking about with the wave folding FM capabilities in a single oscillator. But having it in a modular system is particularly cool because you've generally got control over the individual oscillators as well as how they're kind of pre-routed. So the kind of basic characteristics of a complex oscillator are 2 oscillators, a modulation bus, something like FM or AM, anything like that, as well as wave shaping capabilities. So the ability to take a sine wave and fold it into a much more harmonically rich, complex waveform. Anyway, I'm going to show you guys a couple of really cool things about this particular one. Let's dive in and have a look. So I quickly want to go through the layout of the Mindphaser. So essentially you've got 2 identical discrete analog cores. The only differences between them are a couple of inputs and outputs and a couple of parameters that may change between the two, but the actual sound generation between the 2 oscillators is exactly the same. So you've got the 2 oscillators, the M and C, modulator and carrier. The modulator has the ability to sync quickly to the carrier, whereas the carrier has a sync input. That's cool for triggering Cytrons baselines, and you can sync the phase of the oscillator to hard reset on the trigger. And this is cool for being able to quickly sync the modulator to the carrier for FM stuff, where you want it to kind of remain tonal. Another major difference is that with the modulator oscillator, you've got the ability to quickly switch the range in octaves, which is very, very cool to, once you found an FM or phase modulation sound, to be able to quickly switch the ratios without taking it into the kind of atonal territory. So essentially, you've got the outputs over here at the bottom for the modulator oscillator, and then outputs over here for the carrier oscillator. As you may have noticed, you don't have a sine wave output. That's fed directly through the wave shaper and phase modulation bus, which I'm going to get into just now. Another difference is that the modulation oscillator is fed directly into the mod bus over here. And this index parameter is basically the amount of modulation oscillator that gets applied to the mod bus. And you may have noticed you get these little triangles next to a bunch of these attenuator parameters. And those are essentially the destinations of the internal routing of the Modbus. So let's say, for example, you want to FM the carrier from the modulator. You simply just turn up the linear FM. So 2 oscillators, coarse pitch control, fine pitch control. This is your octaves over here. Each of the oscillators has FM inputs. The carrier obviously has the Modbus destination pre-assigned. And then the sine wave from the carrier is fed directly into the wave shaper over here. So the wave shaper has got 3 parameters. You've got folds and a feedback and then amplitude. This is full range amplitude modulation. So this can act almost as a VCA internally to the oscillator. I'll show you how that works just now. And then from this output, it's fed through this soft clipping, is fed to the PM bus. So like I said, this is independent from everything that's happening there internally. So you can get a stable source sound out while phase modulating to get a kind of second voice without affecting the pitch of the carrier signal. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. This is the PM bus. And this is the saw wave. So I'm going to route that saw wave into a filter over here, and then route this phase mod output into a separate channel on the mixer over here. So as you can see, it's pretty crazy. You can keep, you can have like a solid saw wave baseline or something coming out of this oscillator, just triggering a VCA or something, while you've got that kind of like droney phase modulation sound coming out of this oscillator. The thing about FM, often when you use FM, it detunes the signal quite a bit, so you end up having to retune the oscillator. And that's one of the absolute bonuses of having an independent phase modulation bus, is being able to get a stable oscillator signal out of one of the cores. So we could get another signal out of one of the other cores, for example, to use like as a sub bass underneath those layers. So let's get some modulation going. I want to maybe use this marbles over here and this woggle bug to trigger some parameters, do some LFO type stuff, some modulations of the filter, some of these folds and that kind of thing. So let's get one of these random outs over here, get this into the filter. So I want to use this amplitude control to trigger with an envelope over here. I'll use the Euclidean, it's already patched, and trigger this envelope, which I'm going to send to the amplitude modulation input and then turn the parameter all the way up. And we can play with this amount. So using the amplitude modulation system and sending it an external ADSR signal, we're essentially creating a VCA. We could send it the modulation oscillator, but this gives it a little bit more versatility if you're in a smaller system that you maybe are lacking on VCAs. Okay, now that I've got it patched up, I can start talking about some of the special features. So a lot of the time with attenuverters, well, here with the exponential FM, you go into the negative and positive, for example. But with some of the things that are pre-patched, it'll be difficult to initialize a attenuverter where its zero is kind of sitting in the middle because there's no notch there with these smaller knobs. So one really clever way that they've worked around that is that all of the pre-patched attenuverters have an invert system with a button. And all you need to do is to invert the signal is just press that button. So you can very easily find zero, boom, no modulation going through. And then hit it on zero to send it inverted modulation. So we've now inverted the modulation coming from this decay, turning into more of like a sidechain kind of thing. I'm going to show you how cool it is having this range control over here. So what it's doing is it's changing the octaves of the modulation oscillator. So at the moment we've got, I've unpatched the amount going through there. So essentially this attenuverter is controlling the amount of Modbus going through to the phase mod index. Okay, so here what we're doing is we're changing the octave of the modulation signal. So to understand this better, if you've been following my channel, something like Serum, if you've got the two oscillators phase modulating each other or FM each other, what we're doing now is we're just changing the octave, and you know how that vastly changed the kind of timbre of the sound. So check this out. And that doesn't affect the octave of the carrier. So again, if we've got this doing a bass line, then this is not going to affect that. And you can see at the moment we've got it doing a sine wave on the Modbus, but you can actually change that over here. So you can change that to a saw. You can quickly invert the shape of the saw using this parameter over here. So let's jump back to the overview. I want to show you guys the fact that it's got kind of two different wave shaper styles built in. So let's just sort of unpatch this to the best of our abilities. I'm just going to try initialize everything. So I want to show you guys specifically the shape of the different wave folders. This one, which we've been using, is the triangle, which is a symmetrical style of wave shaping. I guess closer to the traditional Buchla style. But there's another style called rhomboid, which is asymmetrical. And this is a little bit more kind of gritty. And it's a very cool way of kind of creating FM-like tones without even patching any FM stuff in. So I'm going to show you what this sounds like. Okay, so this patch is Basimilus Iteratus Alta doing the kick, plates doing all the hi-hats percussion stuff, and I'm just going to play around with Mindphaser doing the kind of like FME thing, as well as a bass. So how it's working is the saw wave is going into a filter, and then this pip slope envelope is basically controlling the amplitude, like the VC, like a kind of VCA setup, like I was explaining earlier. And then what I've done is the inverse modulation of that is controlling the cutoff. So as this VCA snaps, then this one opens, if that makes sense. As this ADSR closes, this filter opens. So it kind of creates this like, sounds like one tone. It's like a FM that melts into a kind of like saw wave tone. And then I've sidechained that using the mutant hot glue over here. Sidechained it to the kick drum. So this is what that sounds like. Let's look at some of the FM capabilities of the Mindphaser. So like I mentioned before, the linear FM is directly connected to the Modbus. However, linear FM doesn't really offer that much control in terms of the amount of modulation that gets applied to the signal. So often for more timbre control in the sound, we go with exponential FM. However, a problem with using FM in the analog realm is that when you start modulating one oscillator to the other one, it starts to apply a bit of detune. So there's a couple of ways around this, and I want to show you a couple of tricks that I've picked up with the Mindphaser. Let's look at the differences between phase modulation, exponential FM, and linear FM. So at the moment, I've got the two oscillators tuned to exactly the same pitch. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this phase modulation output and route that into my DAW so we can have a look at the waveform. So it's a very stable FM-like control, and the other cool thing about the Mindphaser is that you've got the range control that quickly switches the octaves. So you can quickly get those varying, the change in the kind of frequency of that timbre without it going into the kind of atonal territory. So let's have a look at what the FM is doing. Just so I don't have to patch anything up, let's have a look at the linear FM directly from the Modbus. So it's a little bit wobbly due to the fact that it's detuning the two oscillators, or in fact it's detuning one of the oscillators compared to the other one. So to get FM quickly routed, what we need to do is we need to send one of these outputs into the FM input over here, and then we've got control over the amount with this parameter here. So there we've got a lot more control. It goes into that really high-pitched territory. But the problem is it's unstable. As you increase the FM amount, the carrier oscillator starts to detune ever so slightly. And one way of quickly being able to fix that is to send the pulse output of the modulator oscillator into the sync input of the carrier oscillator. Pretty awesome timbral control there by just self-patching it a little bit. So now let's have a look at when we start to add even more harmonics using the wave shaper and start to distort with the feedback over here. Check this out. So by default, the feed for the phase modulation bus is the sine wave from the modulation bus. That being said, you're not limited to that. You can feed it an input from anywhere. It could be a sample from another module. It could be an oscillator signal from another module, LFO, or it could be one of the other shapes from within this module itself. So we could modulate it, for example, with a saw wave. So in this patch, I've got the Mindphaser doing a baseline, as well as the phase modulation bus is doing a kind of FME type sound. You'll hear that it's kind of like a gated FM sound, which is going through slight filter. And then the kick drum is being done by the Mutable Instruments Platts. Well, it's a clone of Platts. And I've got like a sort of Goa trancey kind of lead being done by the Waldorf NW1. So this is what that sounds like. I also just want to say an absolutely huge thank you to Stacy at Hexinverter for sending me this module. I believe it was part of the prototypes, so I was one of the first to actually get the module. So it's pretty cool to be able to explore the thing without any outside influence and stuff like that. So yeah, it was pretty interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed my journey through this module. And also, yeah, Stacy, if you're watching this, thanks for the chicken. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm going to definitely be posting quite a lot more videos on this module as I kind of discover more, sound design capabilities above the, technical stuff. So stick around for those. Yeah, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. See you guys next time.